Where do I begin to try and explain what the real Texas is all about? Alright, imagine if 3D dot game heroes, Legend of Zelda, an RPG, and an adventure game all had a mutated baby that could very likely end up being the undoing of mankind. Alright, now that's what the real Texas is like. You take the role of a guy who has inherited a farm that goes on vacation only to stumble into a very odd world called Strange Texas. If there's one word that will be uttered more often than any other in this review, it's most likely going to be the word quirk. To say that the real Texas is quirky is an understatement. You spend your time running around a very large world, shooting at large blobs and being peed on by Russian rustlers. At least I think that's what he's supposed to be, and I think that's supposed to be pee, although it is multicolored, so maybe a tad confusing. Let me be the first to say that I can completely see where the appeal is in this game. It's got a great sense of humor, the atmosphere is unique, and the game weaves a narrative that is so bizarre that you can certainly say that it's not cliche. The world is wide open with lots to explore, and there's lots of little creatures to accost with your 6-shooter. With the appeal being seen, I can't honestly say that those positives stack well against the negatives the game has. Let's go ahead and get started on those. While the music is slightly charming at first, it quickly wears out its welcome with repetitiveness. There are a few exceptions to this rule, but the majority of the songs will have you turning down the audio after hearing them 2 or 3 times. The game also has some issues with navigation. Sure, there's a map that is there to help assist, but there's no way to view a large world map all at once. You'll simply have to scroll through a slightly zoomed out version of the minimap. Combat is another point of contention as well. Putting the reticle over an enemy and pulling the trigger will commonly result in a miss with no clear reason why. The player character will periodically stop moving and groan when he's hurt, and while that doesn't sound too terrible, it can make for a frustrating experience when you're trying to escape a hostile enemy that is hot on your heels. It's also impossible to move and shoot at the same time, as every time you try to move or an enemy hits you, your character automatically holsters their weapon. Now this part may simply be a matter of taste, but the dialogue system felt incredibly unwieldy as well. You'll talk to a person, they'll say something, and then many of the words that they mentioned in their dialogue will branch into sub-dialogues. While this sounds like a great way to flesh out the world, much of what they have to say is rather boring and has little to no bearing on the player or his quest. There's also a distinct lack of a mission log, making it sometimes difficult to remember what you were supposed to be doing after getting sidetracked by exploring or conversation. The real Texas is definitely not for the faint of heart. It's a game that's going to appeal to a select few, and I suppose I was not one of those people. And that's strange because I usually really love quirky games. Something about the real Texas just bored the piss out of me. The visuals, combat, and dialogue just were not enough to keep me engrossed in the title. That's a real bummer too, because the game will cost you $15 on Good Old Game, Gamersgate, or Desura. For some of you, the game's unique premise and presentation will be well worth that price of admission. But for the other 90% of us, the money is best spent elsewhere. Sorry developers, the real Texas gets a 2 out of 5.